What an honor. Thank you.
Number 9. Thank you, Mark. It really means a lot. So this is your 9th visit, but this is your 11th book. And it's, as you said, it's the most concise book you've written. And substantively, it's different than the others. What motivated you to write it? How did On Power come about?
Can I just take 2 minutes? I want to thank everybody here for coming, for being patient. This is such a fabulous place. I do 3 signings, always the Reagan Library. Always want to come out to California and see you folks. And we had a lot of people came from all over the country. You're doing a fantastic job. John did a fantastic job. This is a beacon of liberty here. So this is our town hall meeting. And just one other quick thing, I'm sorry. My beautiful wife, who is just fantastic, my mother-in-law, Julie and Sylvia, my daughter, Lauren, my granddaughter here, Sloan, Asher, my son-in-law, Nick, our dear friends, Giovanna, Ken, everybody here, I want to thank them, and all of you, my brothers and sisters. Thank you.
So tell us about this concise book that's different than the other books.
Well, here's the thing. I decided the last book was my longest book, The Democrat Party Hates America. And it wasn't long enough. But I figured people aren't going to read it, right? I mean, there's a point at which you use it to keep your door open or something. So I said, let me try something a little different this time. I'm not going to have a ton of citations. There'll be some references. I didn't invent the word power, but I want to take this word and try and use my own thinking process and reasoning skills to address it. Because I did a lot of thinking about why is it that the other side seems to, I had a little disagreement with my friend Victor Davis Hanson last night. He is my friend. He's great. He's great. And he was pointing out all the positive things that are going on under President Trump. Let's have an applause for that, too. President Trump isn't going to be president for the rest of his life. And so these people, the Marxist Islamists, they don't go away. They don't accept the results of elections. That's why they're Marxists and Islamists. In fact, they don't even like elections. And when they win, as in this state, they change the voting system. They change the system so they can never lose. And by chance, if they do lose, they've empowered this permanent government to sabotage anybody who's elected that they disagree with. So I'm thinking about this. I'm saying, what is it about these people? They understand power. They use it. They abuse it. They're very evil with it. I don't think we understand power that well. We talk about liberty, which kind of goes in one ear. Liberty, okay. And we talk about things like that, with tyranny. I've written about it. But what do we mean by this? And so, honestly, I hurt my leg. I'm staring at the ceiling for 2.5 months, and the nerdy part of my head kicks in, and I'm thinking, how do we address this? Because this is very serious. People say, we'll lose New York, we're not going to lose anywhere else, and then we'll see how bad it is, and then everybody else. They don't work that way. They take New York, they're looking at Chicago, they're looking at Detroit, they're looking at Philadelphia. It's not like all of a sudden people have an epiphany, look at California. Took a couple elections, they took it over, and they've destroyed it. The most beautiful, prosperous state in the country, which was a Republican state. Republican governor after governor, Republican senators, Republican presidents, on and on. Now it's Democrat, 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 Democrat. The idea that this can't happen in other Republican states, to me, is preposterous. Besides, these people are not going to stop. Do they have a history of saying surrender? Okay. So my point is, yes, we should celebrate what's taking place, but no, we need to deal with this. And no, they shouldn't just be able to take New York and we say, well, New York's not Arkansas, so who cares? I care. It's the biggest city in America. Let me ask you this, from a military operation. Is that how we would work with an enemy? Oh, they took New York, but who cares? No. We fight for every damn inch of this country if we can, whether it's in California or New York. We don't cede cities to Marxists and Islamists and think that's okay. It's not okay. So what are we doing that's wrong? First of all, we're doing a lot that's right, but what are we doing that's wrong? And I just started thinking, they think about power, they think about how to get it, how to keep it, how to expand it, how to centralize it. We don't think this way. So we're immediately on defense because our idea is a different kind of power, a dispersed power, a divided power. And so what I do in the book is I say, we better take a look at this word and break it down. I don't think we conservatives or any of us who believe in this society have spent enough time looking at it. And so that's why I decided, let me write a book, not on liberty and, let me write a book on power, and then let me divide it into different categories as I see them, why I think there's positive power and there's negative power. Now, this issue of power, it's a word that's hard to define in every instance, just like the word liberty is hard to define in every instance, or the word rights are hard to define in every instance. So I decided to take a shot at this. And I like what I came up with. This book could have been 1,000 pages longer, but nobody would read it. So I wanted to get the basic stuff in writing, in the book, where people can read it and understand it, even enjoy it or engage in it. And people tell me that they're underlining things, they're dog-eat paging, that's good. It's not the end-all, the book, but it's a pretty damn good start. So I take a look at it and I break it down. And the reason it's important is because we need to get a handle on this, or we are going to lose the country. I don't care how many electoral college votes we have. There's an entire movement out there to get rid of the electoral college. That's what I'm saying. Oh, we're going to have the electoral college. We are, by the way. We're going to have a nice big jump for Republicans in the electoral college. They want to get rid of the electoral college. If they take over the Supreme Court, the country's going to be turned on its head. So it's not so simple as to say everything's going in our direction right now. And I think a lot of things are going in our direction right now. But there are dark clouds, and they don't go away. These people don't go away. Their ideology doesn't go away. They chip away, they hang back. They're right now taking over the Democrat Party. They're taking it over. And there's a little piece of it in ours, too, from my Republican Party. But they are taking over the Democrat. People say, well, they're a minority. Who cares? Mao was a minority. Stalin was a minority. Hitler was a minority. They were all minorities. They had 20, 30% of the population, and they took the country over. You don't take a country over with a majority. You run a country with a majority. So I look at history, ancient history, more modern history, American history. And so this book is intended to begin the debate, the discussion, the thinking among you Paul Revere's and Thomas Paine's out there. So when we start thinking about, from now on, long answer, I know, but when you look at Mondami in New York, it ought to be free food. You're going to starve to death. Or I'm going to take over the means of production. What does that mean in your life? We know the arguments, but it means more. It means you are going to surrender your power to a 33-year-old guy who's an ideologue, an Islamist, and a Marxist. Is that okay with you? Okay, putting everything else aside, you're surrendering your own personal sovereignty and the sovereignty of the community over to somebody. That's what you're doing. And you're not going to get it back. And so this is why I feel this issue of power, when we debate somebody, this is why Bernie Sanders won't come on my programs, this guy won't come on my programs, none of these guys will come on, none of them, not one of them. Because I want to talk about stuff like this and explain who they are and what they really want and what we are and what we really want.
So
that's
why,
why,
Mark, to further baseline everybody in the discussion, where did our founding fathers think power came from?
And this is a crucially important question. Crucially important. Where did this whole idea of sovereignty, the people are sovereign, come from. We're one of the few nations that was founded on that basis. Even in Europe, they weren't really founded on that basis. They had revolutions and they fought over the rights of the people. We started from a blank slate. Europe did not. Europe had feudalism and monarchies and everything else. John Locke, when he wrote about the civil society, the social contract, they said, well, where is this? This is all interesting, but where is it? He said, it's America. America's a blank slate. America didn't have all this stuff before. America is where it's going to work. America is where it worked. He was the most popular philosopher during our revolutionary period. He was in the Enlightenment. So what was this country founded on? People have 14,000 different opinions. But I'll tell you what it was founded on, because when you read, they tell you what it was founded on. God is sovereign. Judeo-Christian belief system, principles. God is sovereign. That's what they said. Now, and I spent time in the book explaining, you can be an atheist, you can be whatever you want, but this nation was founded on that belief. It was not founded on any other religious belief but that. So God is sovereign. Take a look at the Declaration of Independence. He's mentioned 4 times in different ways. Now, what does this mean, natural law, natural rights? They're talking about eternal truths. They're talking about unalienable rights. They're talking about God. Each human being is sovereign, and each human being has these rights because they're God's child, God's children. This is crucially important. So, on earth, God's children, when it comes to government, are sovereign. The individual is sovereign. That's what unalienable rights mean. And the society, the people in the society are sovereign. That predates any government. Remember, this was the Declaration of Independence, not the declaration of a government. This was the declaration, and this is what they declared. What else when you read the Declaration? They fused that with the Enlightenment. In other words, it's one thing to believe, great, we're sovereign. Well, what does that mean? So you start with that premise, and then you start with the premise of the Enlightenment. They embraced the Enlightenment, and what was the key thing they got out of the Enlightenment? When you read Locke and when you read Montesquieu is the most important philosopher during the constitutional period. It's all in the book. And the answer is this: power checks power. Montesquieu says, oh, no, power has to check power. This is crucial. You look at your Constitution next. The Constitution is the embodiment of this belief that the individual is sovereign and power checks power. And so you get the 3 branches. Locke kind of talked about it in an ambiguous way, but Montesquieu is the most specific about a judicial, executive, and a legislative. And he says once one devours the other or one devours the two, you have tyranny. And so what does all this mean? This means that while the individual is sovereign, human beings have very dark sides. A very good side, very dark side. So they never supported pure democracy. So they worried about mobocracy. And they certainly never supported centralization of government because they spent 7.5 years fighting a revolution against a monarchy. Our revolution was about the implementation of this notion of sovereignty and power checking power. So what did they argue for? Representative government. Consensual government. The French Revolution was not about representative government. The French Revolution was about destroying their society, eliminating it. Our revolution wasn't about eliminating the American society. It was about what kind of government do we want to nurture our society. They were about destroying it. We were about building on top of it. Big difference, and that's been a lot of Europe's problem, quite frankly. But America was founded in a completely different way. So the Constitution, you know, has 3 branches of government, power checking power, all throughout it. We get the Bill of Rights later. The reason we didn't have a Bill of Rights right away was because there was a legitimate debate. Madison says, well, if we start listing these rights, what if we leave one out? Mason, one of the smartest who doesn't get the credit he deserves, he wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence came out 4 or 5 weeks later. Jefferson borrowed liberally from him and Locke, and that's okay. Jefferson admits it. He says, we've got to have a Bill of Rights. So they go to the states without a Bill of Rights. So the states say, and I'll finish, I'll bring the point to an end, but I want people to understand the whole history, the background. So they send the Constitution to the states. Now there were 13 colonies, 13 states. And there are 9 states that kept pretty good notes. I've read them all. And in every one of those states, they send back proposals. They say, we can live with this Constitution, but you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. And so they were told, look, let's get this Constitution adopted, and we will revisit this in the first Congress. So they adopt it. It almost lost in New York, very close in Virginia, very close in Massachusetts. That and Pennsylvania, those are the 4 big states. That's where the Federalist Papers came in. Okay, so it's adopted. So Madison gets up, he's elected to Congress. And by the way, he ran against a guy named James Monroe. It's the only time 2 would-be presidents faced each other. And he says, hey, fellas, we promised the states that we'd amend the Constitution. And they said, it's okay, we got it, don't worry. He said, no. He said, I propose a committee of the whole House. And they say that's unmanageable, so he leads this committee, and they come up with 16 amendments, goes to the Senate, they chisel it down to 12, the House adopts the 12, they send it to the states, they adopt 10. Every one of those amendments is to reinforce the rights of the individual, except the 10th, which was to enforce the rights of the states. Crucial. So that underscores what they were talking about, underscores the division of power. All the action was supposed to be in the states, except what's in the Constitution for the national government. The 9th Amendment is effectively referencing the Declaration of Independence about the individual, but it's all about due process and warrants and probable cause and the right to bear arms and religious freedom. That's what it is. That's what it is. I call all this positive power because you can't have anarchy, you can't have bombocracy, small d democracy. We don't live in a small d democracy, nor do you want to. Your rights are unalienable. People don't get to vote on them. There's eternal truths. People don't get to vote on them. They are what they are. They belong to you. So they make this incredible balance in the Constitution. It's incredible what they did. There's not another document, even drafted, that's anything like it, except Stalin's Constitution.
Which is in the book.
I quoted in the book in 1936. His Constitution is beautiful. Beautiful. He steals from ours and adds to it. And adds a lot to it. And you read it, go, holy mackerel, what is this, Sweden or something? It's unbelievable. And in 1937 and 38, he slaughters 8 million Ukrainians. That Constitution's from 1936. And he talks about individual liberty, rights for a free press, you can join a union, you can do this, you can do all these
Religious
things.
freedom.
Religious freedom, all of it and more. So why would I include Stalin's Constitution or part of it in the book? Why? Because liberty without rights means nothing. Rights without power mean nothing. He's issuing all these rights, but he had total power. The people had no power. He's the sovereign, not God. Remember, communism doesn't believe in God. And so I also go into Marxism in the book, where Marx says religion is mysticism. It gets into the way of the revolution. individualism is selfish. These individuals get in the way of the workers' paradise, and it goes down into parents should not have control over their children. Every social construct should be destroyed. Everything that history presented needs to be destroyed. So we can start today. And remember what Locke said about America. Start today what? God's the sovereign, the people are the sovereign. What Marx says is, no God, no parental rights, no individual liberty, nothing. He decides. Whoever takes control decides, and 100 million people dead as a result of that. The point is, you can have the greatest document on paper, but it means nothing if you don't have power. Nothing. And if you don't have the right kind of power, which is why I put that in the book. I'm going to let you answer a third question, but I hope this helps explain why this is such a fantastic country and why the people who are trying to change it are so evil. Because this is an incredible human experiment that's never been done before. Look at the amount of wealth in this country, the power of this country, the significant degree of freedom outside of California, but you know what I mean. And notice something else. Notice that the left is in a constant motion to take power from you, to centralize it in government, whether it's state government or federal government, to tax you, to regulate you, to imprison you, to punish you, to smear you. This is who they are. I call this soft negative power because you can have, this aggressive genocidal kind of Stalinist type of thing, but there's also soft negative power, which is built not from our Declaration and Constitution, but is built on the belief systems and ideology of our enemies. This is Mondami. This is Bernie Sanders. This is really more and more the modern-day Democrat Party. This is what they are. This is who they are. The umbrella of the party, they accept the Islamists, they accept the Marxists, they accept all these elements that seek to destroy our society. So back to my discussion with Victor, when he was saying, look, the Electoral College, this, that, and I said, well, I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. But what if there is no Electoral College? That's a problem. What if they take the Supreme Court? And all of a sudden, all these illegal aliens become citizens, and their children are citizens. What if? These people are working on this right now. This is what they're thinking about right now. And so it is a mistake, a huge mistake, to think that these people are going to go away just because they lose an election or two. They're going nowhere.
And they'll probably add Washington, D.C. as a state.
It becomes a poison.
So let's apply some of the frameworks that are in the book to the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, and then the 7 months of Trump 47. What is the power that's been applied against him, and how do you see him exercising his presidential powers?
These people do not believe in the Constitution. It's a funny thing. For the last 2 or 3 years, we heard the 1619 Project. We heard that the authors of the Constitution were white slave owners, and they basically installed a government that furthers, white nationalism or something like that. If you read American Marxism, that's all laid out there. So they hate the Constitution. Woodrow Wilson was basically a Karl Marx and Engels adherent.
You cite Woodrow Wilson 23 times in your book, by the way.
I should have cited him 123 times. Seriously. But he's the founding father, he and a handful of others, of their self-proclaimed progressive movement. And as I've explained in this book, in American Marxism, there's nothing progressive about it. It's a tailoring or customizing of Marxism for America is what it is. And these people tell you what they believe. They write extensively, and I went to his original works. And he's repeating Marx, but in a different way. So I'll give you another example. Marx talked about the proletariat, the worker bees, overthrowing the property owners, the landlords, the industrialists. Marx died, I think, 1873. The Second American Industrial Revolution, which was the key one, occurred in 1870 and beyond. There was an early industrial revolution, but the one that really mattered and built America was the second. And for all this left-wing talk about robber barons, it created the most massive, prosperous middle class on the face of the earth. You hit a switch, and the light comes on. Turn the faucet on, you get clean, hot, or cold water. We were feeding millions and millions of people, where other countries, they're starving to death. And I can go on and on and on. The steel industry, and trains, and everything else, mobility, and automobiles, and everything else. These so-called robber barons wouldn't have been wealthy but for a massive middle class earning money and buying stuff. So they were extremely patriotic. They were never going to enter a violent revolution in our country and overthrow the government. Instead, they put on the uniform and went to war to defend our country. So Marx was wrong basically on everything. So there's another communist, his name's Gramsci. He's Italian, and he's put in prison for a long time by Mussolini. And he writes, he says, Marx got it wrong. In Western societies like America, and he writes a book like this, they always write books like this, and he says, the revolution needs to come from the top down. It's not going to come from the bottom up. And what did he mean by that? He said what he meant by that. You've got to create a bureaucracy and slowly populate it with communists and slowly take control of the society. What does that have to do with Woodrow Wilson? Everything. Woodrow Wilson wrote the same thing. He didn't call it communism. You know, they call them, oh, I'm a democratic socialist, oh, I'm a progressive, oh, they're communists. And so that's what's been going on really since the early 1900s, but has really taken root and has moved fast. The fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy, is not in the Constitution. Not only did they create this massive bureaucracy, and it started with these guys, there was some, you need some, obviously, but they really pushed for a completely fourth governing branch that would be filled with so-called experts. Tell me, how many experts are in the bureaucracy? Most, like none? Do you have, when you get a job, and they're smart people, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of dummies too. So the point is, even their theory has never really been put to practice. You wouldn't call the bureaucracy the place where the smartest people in the country go, would you? No. Like the Department of Agriculture, what do they have, 3 farmers probably over there? I'm just guessing. Department of Energy, they haven't drilled for crap over there. You know, they don't know. But they're experts. Okay. But what they want is control. So, power. Not only do they create this fourth branch, they put it in the executive branch. So here you have, more laws are made by the bureaucracy than Congress. Did you know that? And it's in the executive branch.
Regulations.
Regulations. So they have destroyed the whole notion of separation of powers. So what does Trump do? He says, wait a minute. I'm in charge of the bureaucracy. I'm the executive branch. They don't get to write these laws, create these government bureaucrats, stick them in the executive branch, and then say, I have no say, which is what every Republican except
And you can't fire us either.
Oh, you can't fire us. You can't eliminate anything. You can't move, this office. You can't do anything. And he said, well, I'm going to put that to the test. So he comes in, and that's not his first 7 months, probably his first 2 months. He starts slashing the bureaucracy. He offers them payouts. He starts firing these guys. He abolishes USAID. He's doing all these things. But what is Trump really doing? He's going into the culture and into the society that undergirds the politics. He's not just dealing with the superficial level, oh, we'll win elections. Win elections for what? He's actually going down where they are, in the culture, in the bureaucracy, in the society, whether it's law firms, whether it is teachers' unions, whether it is colleges and universities that control the society and the culture, and he's saying, okay, I'm going to deal with you guys. That's what makes him so remarkable and so unique and absolutely historic. And this is why they want to destroy him. His first term, I don't know that he had a handle on all that, but it doesn't really matter. He does now. And also, he knows immediately we got to close the borders, not just because of all the illegal immigrants coming in, because he knows that's a power play by the Democrats to get all these extra seats, birthright citizenship, and what nobody talks about, and I talk about, is what about chain migration? You have all these illegal aliens here who have children who would be citizens, and when they reach the age of majority, they can bring relatives in. We're not talking about 20 million illegal aliens. We're talking about 200 million people, and that's the end of the country, because we don't assimilate anymore. In fact, we assimilate into these other cultures. They don't assimilate into ours. And so he sees that. But Biden and his people, they saw the opposite. Why were the borders open? To do exactly what I'm saying. And why are their judges opposed to deportation? That's the law. You don't have to commit additional crimes. You're here illegally, you're out. That's the law. Why are they fighting it? They are fighting it because of power. This is a massive power base. And to go further, look at what's happened in Europe. You have an Islamist mayor of London. France has essentially been taken over. The head rabbi in France has told the Jews to get out. Get out. He got 10 years, get out. Can you imagine? In Britain, many of the larger and mid-sized cities, even though the Muslim population represents, it's big though, 15 to 20% of their population now, they control a lot of these cities because they vote in groups. In our own country, you have Marxists and Islamists taking over our universities, marching down our streets, burning the American flag, burning the Israeli flag, carrying the Hamas flag, carrying the Islamic Jihad flag. Where did this come from?
Chanting from the river to the sea.
River to the sea. And by the way, it's now spreading to attacks on Christians too, which is what you have to expect. Remember I said the country is founded on Judeo-Christian belief system. Without Judaism, there's no Christianity.
And it never stops with Jews either.
Well, let's take a look in the Middle East. Where are the Christians? Where are the Jews? The Christians are in Israel. The Christians that are in Egypt, the Coptic Christians, are abused, killed, second-class citizens. They're trying to blow them out. The Christians, there are almost no Christians in Iraq, I can go through these Arab countries if you want. Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, is 80% Palestinian now. 10 years ago, it was 80% Christian. The Christians are forced out. Hebron. You know who's buried in Hebron? Abraham, among others. There are 85 Jewish families left in Hebron. 85. And the IDF has to surround that city to protect those 85 families. Shiloh. Ever hear of Shiloh? Shiloh is in Judea and Samaria. Shiloh is where Judaism was born. That's where the tribes came together. The Palestinians say it's theirs. I want you to go to the Dead Sea Scrolls thing here. I want you to show me where the Palestinians are in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're not in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're not in the Torah, and they're not in the New Testament either. Power. There's almost no effective Christian population except in Israel. Some of the other countries, yes, but they have equal rights. No. There's almost no Jews, the birthplace of Judaism, in the Middle East except almost exclusively in the state of Israel. And Israel needs to go. The Holy Land has to go because that's just too much, you see. That's just too much. And so I'm explaining now with Islam. I talk about the book on this marriage of Islam and Marxism. Now, I've been talking about this for about 10 years. Now others are starting to figure it out. They call it the green and the red revolution. They can call it whatever they want. I call it the fusion of Marxism and Islam. They don't want to say the word Islam. I didn't say all Muslims. I said Islam because that's what it is. And so I explain, other than the end game, they have the same means game. And how do you know? Because they write it and they tell you. The elimination of Western culture, the elimination of Jews, the elimination of Christians and Buddhists and Hindus, the elimination of Muslims who don't go along with the radical Islamists. The Islamists have killed more Muslims than anybody else, as a matter of fact. Communism wants to get rid of the West. In Islam, there is no individual free will. In communism, there is no individual free will. Communism, there is no free speech. With the Islamic terrorists, there is no free speech. There is none of these things. And so they have a common enemy, us, America, the West, the Jews, the Christians, Muslims who don't agree with them. They'll figure it out in the end who will be in charge, like Trotsky and Stalin had to figure it out in the end. But they figure we need to get to that point. So I make the point that guys like Mandami or Bernie said, their views are utterly, utterly opposite of American views. They're utterly incompatible with our belief system, our founding, and all the rest of it. Now, one other thing, though. As I explain in the book, you can practice Islam in the United States. You can practice whatever you want or nothing. You can do whatever you want if you leave other people alone. We have a First Amendment. You're free to practice your faith, and you can't impose it on anybody else. It's a government. That's the genius of the Judeo-Christian belief system and the application of that through the fusion with the Enlightenment. But Islamism is in the 7th century. It never went through the Enlightenment, and it never went through the Reformation. It's primitive. That's why the way they kill people and torture people is primitive. That's what it is. Marxism, I make the same point, is primitive. It's a throwback to it is a very complex way of describing fascism, but in a way of drawing people into it. So, the workers' paradise. One of the great defects of Marxism, there are many, there's no end game with mankind. Well, what workers' paradise? That's not how humanity works. We're going to have a workers' paradise, and everybody's going to be, that'll be the end. No, it won't.
North Korea is working out pretty well.
Right. But from a theoretical, everything he wrote was wrong. The bottom isn't going to overthrow the country, the proletariat. There is no end game workers' paradise. There's no such thing. We have it's the closest thing to a workers' paradise. Would you rather be an assembly line worker in America, or in North Korea, or in Russia, or in China, or in Cuba, as Bernie Sanders calls it? No, you'd want to be in the United States. So there is no workers' paradise. The only end game is whatever God decides the end game is, but it's not man that does. So for the Islamists, the end game is, and they cite the Quran, and their scholars have written about it, so-called, who push this terrorism, you must eliminate all obstacles, all of them. Marxism, you must eliminate all obstacles. So the individual means absolutely nothing. If you speak out with a different point of view, you have to be eliminated. If you are a quote-unquote opposition party, you must be destroyed. Opposition ideology, you must be destroyed. There could be no free speech. Whole chapter on language here. The point of speech is to communicate what the government wants done, not what you think. It's not to share knowledge or information. It's not to check the government. All that is the enemy of centralized government. They want obedience, not the sharing of knowledge. They want compliance. They want coercion. Language is thought control. Hey, somebody has a new idea. Maybe it's a minority view. It becomes a majority view. Hey, that's pretty smart, or maybe we can make something better. No. This is why you see the move by the Democrats. It's constant. We're going to have they always want to amend the First Amendment. Have you noticed that? They always want to amend it. And so, during a campaign, this guy shouldn't be able to speak, that guy shouldn't be able to speak. When you and I are saying, no, everybody should be able to speak. They don't view it that way. Remember, there was going to be a Department of Disinformation or Misinformation or whatever in Homeland Security, wherever they're going to, what? Wilson did it. FDR did it. Biden tried to do it. We don't do that. So I call the modern Democrat Party, or even not the party, the people today who are sort of the Islamist, Marxists, I call them authoritarian small d Democrats, because they'll go through the process of elections. They'll go through the process of court. They'll go through all that, but they don't believe in it. If they don't win, they sabotage it, like they try to sabotage Trump. If they win, they try to make permanent changes. Supreme Court, they would like to increase the number, pack the court, open borders, change the population. When we win, typically, it's just another election cycle. That's why they kill us. Except this time, because Trump has said, and I'm going to dig into this.
So, Mark, another way the left has gone after Donald Trump is through the judges, and you talk about judicial tyranny. So tell us more about your assessment of the judiciary over the last 7 months, and then also, relatedly, since you mentioned Israel, you also mentioned in the book, you say Israel is a prime example of judicial tyranny. So tell us more about that.
I think you're going to love this book when you read it, but I really do. How many here bought the book already? All of you. So I don't have to tell you to go buy the book. I just want you to read the book, okay? Please read the book. Remember, we talked about 3 branches of government. Now, in your Constitution, there are no lower courts. The only thing in this Constitution is the Supreme Court. And the Chief Justice, they call him of the United States, not of the Supreme Court. Now, you can change the numbers of justices. Every court below the Supreme Court is not in the Constitution. Congress has the power to create them and the president to sign off on it. That's a lot of power. So the fact that these judges are where they are, they don't have to be. The fact that these judges have certain substantive areas that they can rule, they don't have to. They can limit. As a matter of fact, one area they did limit it on was immigration. And they created these administrative law judges and all this other stuff. And the Supreme Court didn't like it. There's not a damn thing they could do about it. Congress has the power to take jurisdiction away from courts, give jurisdiction to courts. It doesn't exercise any of that power. Barely. Okay. So how the hell do lower courts start issuing rulings running the executive branch?
And nationwide injunctions, too.
Nationwide injunctions, nationwide class action, classes that now they create to get around the nationwide injunction ruling of the Supreme Court. My first book was Men in Black. I wrote about judicial tyranny. That's what you're seeing, judicial tyranny. Montesquieu talks about this. Jefferson talks about it. They all do. You can have the tyranny of the executive. You can have the tyranny of the legislative. You can have the tyranny of the judicial. Just because somebody walks into a courtroom in a robe doesn't mean that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Just because people are elected to Congress doesn't mean they can't be tyrants. They certainly can be, and many of them are. And that's their point. Tyranny's tyranny, no matter how it's, and I call this authoritarian democracy. Look at this, we have 3 branches. Look at this, we have a court. Well, if that judge is a tyrant, I don't care what goes on in that court. That is what it is. And so early in our history, you're going to get some very interesting history lessons here. As a matter of fact, a guy by the name of Jeff Rosen, I believe he's the executive director of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, he wants me to come on a podcast. Why? He's much more liberal than I am, but he tries to be a straight shooter. So when liberals try to be straight shooters, I can deal with them because at least they try. That's just easy target for me. So anyway.
And there's a difference between liberals and leftists.
A liberal's an old-time liberal. You know, we all went to school with these guys. They're fine. It's easy enough. We're talking about people now who are absolute crackpots, you know, absolute kooks. There's almost no such thing as liberals anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. Anyway, so what's interesting is early on in our history, a little history lesson, and I talk about Hamilton. How many of you love Hamilton here? Raise your hand. Yeah. We like Hamilton, right?
Uh-oh, you just walked into a trap.
Hamilton and Madison were the main authors of the Federalist Papers, and John Jay wrote about 6 of them. He would be the Chief Justice of the United States first. But they were, Hamilton, so he fought for the Constitution, right? But what else did he do? At the Constitutional Convention, he proposed, because he was concerned that you know, you're going to have people coming into government that aren't serious and so on. So he proposed 2 different things. He proposed a permanent Senate, and the delegates said, what's he, a knucklehead or something? So nobody supported that. And then he proposes a permanent president. And Madison says, boy, this guy really is a knucklehead. so they opposed that. And yet he's out there pushing the Constitution later. But then it comes to a head, the Constitution's adopted, George Washington's president. He's got a Secretary of State by the name of Jefferson. He's got a Treasury Secretary by the name of Hamilton. Madison's a member of the House of Representatives. And so this proposal comes for a national bank. Well, Washington says it. He said, well, can we do this or not? So he asked Hamilton for his advice. He asked Madison and Jefferson. So Hamilton, brilliant writer and a prolific writer, brilliant man, lawyer, and so on, which probably doesn't mean he's brilliant, but you get my point. So he writes a very well-articulated position that, yes, that under our Constitution, even though the language isn't explicit, it is implied that the government has to have power over our finances and so forth. So Jefferson flips out. He says, excuse me, there's no implied powers in the Constitution. They're explicit powers. That's what the text is. If there's implied powers, it means the text means nothing. Nothing. Congress can't just start passing laws because they claim there's an implied power. There's no authority for a bank. Madison says, I agree with him. We have no power. Congress has no power to do this. So Washington sides with Hamilton. And they create the national bank. By the way, as soon as Jefferson's elected president, he gets rid of it. Like Trump. But this began the first argument about this activist interpretation of the Constitution. It goes further. There's a clause we call in the Constitution the necessary and proper clause. Now, modern lawyers hear this because that's the clause that every activist pours their viewpoints into and says, but it's necessary and proper for the national security of the United States that we do this. It's necessary and proper for the border that we do this. But the necessary and proper clause has nothing to do with that. They made it clear, it was almost a throwaway. They said Congress has the power to pass laws that are necessary and proper to execute their constitutional authority, not to create new areas of substantive lawmaking. So the National Congress was never intended to be what it is today. They passed laws on anything and everything. That was supposed to be the power in the states. So that's why they want to talk to me, because this guy's an expert on Hamilton. He said, I never really knew this, because you have to really dig and find this stuff. Okay. Then something else happened soon after that, a decision called Marbury versus Madison, which even over at my friends, the Federalist Society, that is a great decision. No, it's the worst decision ever. There's a case where the Federalists lost everything. Jefferson won. The presidency, the Senate was majority Republican that was coming in, and they won the House. There was a long period, November to March, a lame duck back then. The Constitution changed that, but before the new party could take over, the new government could take over. So there's a lot of room for mischief. So what does John Adams do? He takes his Secretary of State, who's John Marshall, and he makes him the Chief Justice of the United States, which of course is confirmed by the Federalists who control the Senate. And the Republicans are looking there and saying, what the hell are these guys doing? He also tries to force in other federal judges. So here you have Marshall, who signed off on the certificates. This by itself is unethical. Signs off on the certificate. And later, when he's Chief Justice of the United States, he's deciding on whether his own decision is constitutional or not. Some great decision. So a long story short, trust me, it's a long story, I'm going to cut it short. Marshall and Jefferson are distant cousins. They hate each other's guts. They've been fighting with each other. Jefferson's more of a states' rights, agrarian type. Marshall is more of a Hamiltonian type, and so forth. And so this case comes before the Supreme Court because Madison, who becomes Jefferson's Secretary of State, says, I'm revoking these appointments, these signatures. I'm revoking them at the direction of the president. So there's a suit that's brought by one of these people and says, excuse me, I was appointed and I have a property right to that judgeship. Marbury. And so Marshall, being the politician that he is, he writes, no, you don't have any property right, and so forth and so on. And no, Jefferson wins this, but we, the Supreme Court, get to make the final decisions on constitutional issues. Excuse me? Jefferson said, say what? So he's looking at this. Now we have a Congress that can pass a law on anything it wants, and a Supreme Court where that doesn't say judicial review or anything else in the Constitution, where it says, you know what, somebody has to make a decision, so we'll make the decision. And Jefferson says, no, we have plenty of instances in the states where the Supreme Courts in the states have to share that power with their legislatures and the governor. There's some areas where the governor makes the final decision. What's this? And Marshall said, you know, it's the only logical explanation. Why else would the framers give us this authority? So he grabs authority for the court, and Congress grabs authority from the states. This is early on. And I explain this here on power, because this battle's early on, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. But that's Hamilton. Now you know why some jerk wrote a play called Hamilton? And now you know why every left-wing kook loves to go, oh, that Hamilton play, it's unbelievable. You know, it's just, somebody needs to write a play about Madison and Jefferson, you know.
Well, you're in Hollywood, so we have time for one or two quick questions.
I apologize, but I wanted to explain.
Quick questions. So there are microphones, and I see a question right over there. A lady right over there.
I haven't covered much. I hit right these there. Areas here. I screwed up your questions, I think.
We're good.
Keep in mind, we can't see you because the lights are in our eyes.
Okay.
Right over there, Mark.
Well, I had a question about what I think is a bit of a concerning trend on the right. As a Jewish American, I've always seen most instances of anti-Semitism coming from the left, but I think there are voices now on the right, and I run an organization called the Atlas Society. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on that. I mean, even some of my donors tell me not to wear the Star of David because they think I'm going to get attacked.
You won't get attacked here. And the Atlas Society is an excellent organization. Well, you're right. I don't even know whether I call these people on the right. I don't know what I call them. Let me begin this way, if we get our terms right. I've never viewed as constitutionalist conservatives being on the right. If you're for the Constitution, how is that on the right? That's our country's governing document. If you're for the Constitution, you're in the middle. That's it. You're in the core and the center. I don't mean a moderate. I just want to get the language right because I refuse to adopt the left side. So we're not right-wingers. We're constitutionalists, okay? The right-wingers, the Klan, the neo-Nazis, they have more in common with the Islamists and the Marxists. We have nothing in common with these people. So we need to take back the language and the political spectrum. So the Marxists and the Islamists and the neo-Nazis and the rest of them, they may quibble over end results and so forth, but they're the ones who trash the Republic and trash the Constitution. That's number one. Number two, we have a massive movement within the Democrat Party of anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism, and they always go hand in hand. And so you have over half of the Senate Democrats voted to cut off all aid to Israel in the middle of a war. You wouldn't have seen that 10 years ago. Well, they'll bring up AIPAC, an organization that I have no interest in it. Sort of a moderate organization, maybe even left of center. So they want to create the impression that AIPAC controls our foreign policy. No, you know, there's a lot of organizations that are involved in trying to influence foreign policy. Some of them are ethnic, some of them are religious, some of them are ideological, but that's the one they focus on all the time. And again, I'm not even a big fan of these people, that organization, because they're too liberal for me. But that's fine. You're talking about Tucker Carlson. You're talking about Candace Owens. You're talking about Steve Bannon, and maybe 20 more, and you're 100% correct. 100% correct. These people, in my humble opinion, are not what you think they are. They're not what they used to present themselves as. I've been spending months talking about this. You don't bring on Holocaust deniers. You don't bring on individuals who are soft on Hitler, who are trashing Churchill. You don't bring people like on that and then say, I'm just asking questions. No, you're not asking questions. I don't platform people like that. I don't debate, is there a Holocaust or not? There's nothing to debate. So, or Israel's going to drag us into a war. What war has Israel ever dragged us into? That we haven't sent a single infantryman into the Middle East on behalf of Israel, ever. We sent them into Iraq, having absolutely nothing to do with Israel, zero. But when have we sent our military, our personnel in the Middle East to defend Israel? Never. We sent them in Afghanistan. I can go all over the world. Netanyahu doesn't want American troops on the ground. He doesn't want to drag America into anything. He wants the ability to have the kind of equipment they need to defend themselves. That's it. As for those nuclear sites, I spoke with the president about that. He wasn't thinking I got to protect Israel. He's thinking I got to protect the United States of America. These people are nuts, and there's no way that they should have nuclear warheads. Period. But I want to know, Look, nothing I'm telling you is secret. I talk to millions of people every day. But I want to know exactly what war did Israel drag us into? Seriously, which one was it? The Six-Day War? They didn't drag us into the Yom Kippur War. They were attacked. We provided them with arms. They buy our arms. They didn't do that. The other thing that's never reported is the technological advantage. The Israelis, there's 9 million of them. They're surrounded by tens of millions of people. Massive amounts of land. They're this big. They have a tiny population, tiny. We gave arms to the Afghans. They didn't fight, did they? We gave arms to the Iraqis. They didn't fight, did they? The Israelis are warriors. They know if they don't win, they're exterminated. And they're not going to allow that to happen. So it's not them dragging us into war. The other side that's never discussed here is the technological sharing between the Israelis and us. We sell them equipment. They always advance the equipment. They always add things to the equipment, to the jets, to the armaments, to the tanks, and everything else. That's why when the Russians and these different wars, they used to give them to the Syrians and the Egyptians, our tanks that we sold to these were not only better, but they were equipped for that kind of warfare and that climate and so forth and so on. Ronald Reagan started the anti-missile missile system, strategic SDI, and he was mocked and everything else. The only country that ever signed an MOU with us to develop was Israel. Israel said, we got to do something. They, today, have among the most advanced strategic defense initiative missile defense system on the face of the planet. We do too, to a point. So when we build this, the president called it the Golden Globe to protect us. Dome. We're going to need Israel's technology. And they've already said, whatever you want, you can have. Same with the jet fighters. Same with the jet fighters. They have saved the United States billions of dollars by working with our jet corporation. This is all public. You can look it up yourself. By proposing technological changes to some of our jet capabilities. And by the way, as a side point, you know where the great advance is next? Lasers. You know who's ahead of everybody on lasers? The Israelis. And they said, we will give whatever we figure out to the Americans. They had to figure out, you can concentrate light, but over distance, it dissipates. So how do you fix that? So listen to the genius of these people. I'm not kidding. So they've said, okay, you don't shoot it all out at once. You have millions of shooting of light. So as one dissipates, the other's backs up. So in other words, it can shoot at long distances now. And they're trying to develop this because that's a complete game changer with drones, with ballistic missiles, and everything else. And they've said to us, we will work with you. We will give you that technology. So the intelligence that they gather in the Middle East, the technological advances that they gather in the Middle East, you won't hear about any of this stuff. Any of this stuff. So to answer your question, yes, we have a problem with some of these people. So stop subscribing to them. Stop watching them. Stop giving them eyes and clicks and hits and whatever crap and all the rest of it it's called. And they won't survive.
Mark, our time is drawn to a close.
I go on and on.
We're going to wrap with an implied ominous warning for the United States that appears in your book. You say, of course, there are democracies that have lasted several centuries, but in the end, they've all succumbed to the steady increase in the centralization of power and a decline in individual and societal liberty. Sadly, this appears to be the nature of things. You also continue, you say, even the most wisely conceived nation states seem to fail in the end. Later in the book, you say, indeed, all governments come and go over the course of human history. So what are the implications for all of us here who love America and its principles?
All governments collapse at some point. Every damn single one of them. Athens, Rome, British Empire. The sun doesn't set on the British Empire. There is no British Empire. You can see the West is collapsing in Europe, in my view. A lot of those governments, to the extent they survive, they're not what they used to be. Our government's not what it used to be, even though it's the best on the face of the earth. Rome is a perfect example. Rome survived 1,000 years, half of that about 400 and some years as a republic, and then as an empire, but it collapsed, and it had all the power in the world. Athens, too, had all the power in the world. It was defeated by the Persians. I'm just making the point that no government survives in perpetuity. In fact, no country survives in perpetuity. It doesn't mean we can't, but it means we got to embrace those things, advance those things that prolong our existence. And that's why when we talk about the Electoral College, that's fine. Let's talk about the Electoral College and congressional. But if you look at the bigger picture, negative power devours positive power unless you fight for the positive power like our Constitution and other things. And that's my point in the book, which is liberty, let's talk about it. Rights, let's talk about it. But if we don't have the power to do what we need to do, we won't survive. Because power does not exist in a vacuum. Somebody controls it. Either they do or we do. Look at this state. You've got a commission, the Coastal Commission. The people have no say. Zero. Look at your electoral system, the ranked voting system. So you have a Democrat who wins and a Democrat who comes in second. They're doing that also in Alaska to help a Republican, Lisa Murkowski. But eventually it'll be used to turn Alaska Democrat. And they're putting this in places. They have the national popular vote movement, which has a significant number of states that have signed up. Even though it's unconstitutional, if they get the Supreme Court, they'll say to eliminate the Electoral College. All these barriers that have been built into our constitutional system to check power on power are under attack. So we have a respite, but they're under attack. Now, I don't want you to go home and jump off the roof. That's not the point of this. But I do want you to go home, read the book, and keep in mind, let's change the debate a little bit. Let's change the discussion a little bit. I'm going to arm you with tools to do that, arguments where you can make the case. You send your kid off to college or something, arm them. Hello, I don't mean guns. I mean with knowledge, with books. Because ideas do win the day, believe it or not. Ideas make the difference, whether it's Islamism or Marxism or Americanism or whatever. Things catch on and things are destroyed. So that's the point of this book. The other point is, I don't believe that we should wait for colleges and universities, or even worse, the media, whatever that is. They're not going to do what we want them to do. They're not. So we have to do what we want to do. That's why I write books, so you can read them, get the information. You don't have to read mine, read others. Gather information. This nation was founded on pamphlets and newspapers and word of mouth. And I'm saying pamphlets, word of mouth. There's tens of millions of us. Tens of millions of us. Gives a damn what they say on CBS or whatever. Tens of millions of us, the breakfast table, the dinner table, and so forth and so on. And we will win the day.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mark.